So inflation is what you call persistent rise in the prices of commodity altogether, where we're saying that money supply should basically be equals to money demand. So if you basically print a lot of money and circulate it into an economy, one of the things that we are basically going to, one of the things that we are basically going to, we are going to experience is that one of the things that we are basically going to experience is that there will be what you call inflation. That is persistent rise in the prices of commodity altogether. If there's a lot of money in circulation vis-a-vis the demand, is that you tend to realize that whatever cost maybe 100 shillings, you now buy it at 400-500 shillings. And that is what you call inflation. So we say that inflation, particularly when I was talking about inflation in terms of the rates of inflation, the inflation at lower level, let's say at 2 to about 6% rate, does not affect economy that much altogether. So it does not affect the economy, particularly when I was talking about the rates of inflation. Do you remember that? So we start with the positive effects of inflation. We start with what's called positive, and we call it effects of what we call of inflation. Positive effects of inflation. So when it comes to the positive effects of inflation, when it comes to positive effects, promote creation of employment. One of the things that it does is promote what you call creation of what you call of employment. Promote what you call creation of what you call the employment. It does promote creation of employment. Then government revenue through taxes increase. We have the government revenue, and you're saying through taxes increases. Together, Magdalene, especially inflation at lower rate. Government revenue through taxes basically increases. Give money more, yes, if we are together. So government revenue through taxes basically increases. Are we together? But we talk about what we call the level of national income. Again, when it's at lower level, increases. Level of what I call of national income, call it increases. The level of national income, we say increases. The level of national income, we have it basically increasing. So the level of national income will definitely have it increasing. Then we can talk about holding the wealth. Those holding wealth in real estate will gain. Those, we say holding wealth, holding what's called wealth. We call it in form of what we call real estate. In form of what we call real estate. Those that basically hold the wealth in form of real estate will gain, since asset increase value will gain since assets, we say basically increases the value. Since the asset, we say increases what we call the value. Since the assets will definitely, we say assets increase what we call the value. Since the asset basically increases what we call the value. Respond with a yes if we are together. Since the assets basically increases what we call value. So during inflation, money loses what we call its purchasing power. However, if as an individual decide to hold money in form of asset, for example, real estate, you're going to gain, you are going to gain. Together, people do not prefer money. During inflation, they prefer to hold their wealth in form of assets. Magdalene, give me a yes. So you can also talk about those who borrow more gain. Those who borrow, we need to understand that those who borrow gain since. So if you borrow, you basically gain since they refund money of lesser value. Since they refund, we say they refund what they call money of what they call of lesser value. Money loses value during inflation, since they refund money of a lesser value. So we talk about inflation motivate people to work hard. Inflation, when money has no value, inflation, we need to understand motivates. We say motivates people. People to do what? To work hard, to work harder. Harder to do what? To cope with effects, to cope, and we call it with effects. So they basically motivate people to work harder, basically to cope up with the effects of inflation. So when there's inflation, we basically understand that people definitely work extremely hard to basically cope up with the effects of inflation. Tafadhali bonyeza yes if you're together. To cope up with the effects of inflation. So then I want us to proceed to the negative effects of inflation, negative effects of inflation. Whenever you tell people that there are positive effects of inflation, it feels so strange, but these are the positive effects of inflation. Then we talk about negative effects. Negative, we call it effects of what we call of inflation. Negative effects of what we call of inflation. Negative effects of what we basically call inflation. So negative effects of inflation. So one of the first negative, inflation increases what we call the cost of living. So one of the effects, it increases, call it increases, what we call the cost of living, cost of what we call living. It does increase what we call the cost of living as one of the effects of inflation. Then we can talk about the stifle economy, economic growth and development. So stifles what we call economic growth, and what's called development. It does stifle what you basically call economic growth and what's called development. It does stifle what you basically call economic growth and development. It stifle what you basically call economic growth and development. It does stifle what you basically call economic growth and that development. Respond with a yes if you're together. So we can also talk about it causes social evil. When money has no value, social evil. Social, we talk about social evil. Evils such as we have number one, crime. We have prostitution, crime, prostitution, etc. So it does causes what you call social evil such as crime, prostitution, etc. Then you say unequal distribution of income and wealth. So unequal, we have what we call unequal. We call it distribution of what we basically call income and wealth. There's what we call an equal distribution, and we call it an equal distribution of income and wealth. Then it discourages saving. You cannot save because money has no value. You discourage saving. It does discourage. We say it discourages what we call saving. It does discourage what you basically call saving. It does discourage what you basically call saving. Then you have what causes unemployment, since farms retain unemployment. We talk about unemployment. Since we say farms, we talk about retrench workers. Since farms basically retrench workers, since the farms basically retrench workers, causes what we call unemployment. Why? Because farms basically retrench the workers. So it can also cause political. When money loses value, it can also cause what we call political revolution. It can cause what we call political revolution. It can lead to what's called a political revolution. It can lead to what's called a political revolution in a country if it's very high. Are we together? So citizens lose confidence in the currency. We have citizens, we call it citizens losing what we call confidence. Citizens basically losing confidence in what we call in the currency. Losing what we call confidence in the currency. So we have a scenario where citizens basically lose confidence in the currency. Give me a yes if you're together. Citizens basically losing what we call confidence in the said currency. We respond with a yes. So we can talk about consumer suffer during inflation since the cost of living goes up. So we can talk about consumer suffering. And why are they suffering? because the cost of living is so high. Whatever you used to buy at 50 shillings, you're now fetching it at 203 shillings or probably 250 shillings. So people do not learn. So we have talked about that. So I want to talk about very fast because you have the notes and you've read measures to control inflation. So very fast to talk about measures to do what? To control inflation. So when it comes to measures basically to control inflation, we give them in 3 dimensions together. It's good to see you, Jane Macharia. It's good to see you. I've not seen you from yesterday. It's good to see you in class. I have not seen you from yesterday, but it's good to see you today. So measures to control inflation. So basically, when it comes to measures to control inflation, there are basically 3 modalities of controlling inflation. We have monetary policy. We have what's called monetary policy. Monetary policy. We have the monetary policy. We have what's called the fiscal policy. And then we have what we call the non-monetary policy. Non-monetary policy. Together, team. Non-monetary policies. Together. Give it a yes if you're together. So a very common question touches on monetary policies. Are we together? A very common question touches on monetary policy. So we look at monetary policy. Monetary policy. So basically, inflation, there's a lot of circulation of money. So when in your quest to control inflation, the essence is basically to do what? To reduce money supply together. So number 1 is the bank rate. Bank rate is the same as interest rate. When you say bank rate, this is the same as what we call interest rate. How do you use interest rate to reduce what we call money supply? So during inflation, you increase what we call bank rate. Bank rate. So the people are not going to borrow. Increase what we call the bank rate. Tumelewana Jane Macharia and Magdalene. You increase what we call the bank rate or the interest rate. So when you increase the interest rate, what basically happens is that not many people are going to borrow. Perfect. So then we have what's called OMO, open market operation. We call it OMO, and we call it open market operation. Open market operation. So the word in abbreviation, we call it OMO. Are we together? So I want you to get me by paying attention to what I'm saying, because we have already read the notes, paying attention to what Mwalimu is saying. So in paying attention to what I'm saying, when you talk about open market operation, this is buying and selling of securities. Are we together? Buying and selling of securities altogether. We call it buying and selling of government securities. Those are treasury bills and bonds altogether. So when there's inflation, what should be happening in terms of buying? The government should sell security. So we know that government to do what? Sell what we call security. To do what? To reduce. Sell security to reduce. And the word is money supply. Money supply. So during inflation, we expect the government basically to sell, to take away money from people, to reduce what we call money supply. Then we have what we call compulsory deposit. As the third one, we call it compulsory deposit. We give it the word compulsory deposit. So when it comes to compulsory deposit, we know that commercial banks are required to keep specific amount of money in the central bank. Are we together? When it comes to compulsory deposit, we say that commercial banks are normally expected. Commercial banks, we say, are normally expected. And you're saying that they're basically expected to keep a certain amount of money in the central bank. So when there's inflation, what should happen to this? So during inflation, we need to understand that inflation, compulsory, the word is compulsory deposit, we say should be increased. So compulsory deposit should definitely be increased. So on inflation, we basically say that the compulsory deposit should basically be increased, should definitely be increased. Compulsory deposit should basically be increased, should basically be increased. Compulsory deposit, we say that should definitely be increased. Compulsory deposit should basically be increased. A compulsory deposit should basically be increased, should definitely be increased. Together, team, we respond with a yes. Then we have what's called selective credit control. We call it selective credit control. So the next one we call it selective credit control. So when it comes to selective credit control, we're saying that the central bank should dictate. Are you getting me? The central bank should basically dictate. We're saying that the central bank should basically dictate. Central bank should basically dictate areas of public that can apply for loan. Are we together? Central bank should basically dictate areas of public that should basically apply for loan. That should basically apply for loans. Are we together? So this means that the loans needed for any other purpose other than selected cannot be approved. Are we together? So when you talk about selective, I've explained that the central bank should dictate areas where loans should be given. So therefore, loans other than the selected areas should not basically be allowed or approved. Then you have the next, we call it the cash ratio. The next, we call it the cash ratio. So when it comes to what we call a cash ratio, so central bank should basically, we say that increase cash ratio. So we say increase what we call cash ratio. We say so as to do what? To reduce what you basically call money supply. So they should basically increase what we call the cash ratio so as to reduce what we call the money supply. That is basically on the cash ratio. That is basically on the cash rate, on the cash ratio. That is basically on the cash ratio. Should basically, we say that should basically increase what we call the cash ratio, should basically increase what we call the cash ratio so as to reduce what we call, so as to reduce what we call the money supply. Together, team. So then we can also talk about moral suasion, you know. There's what we call basically called moral, you know, we call it moral suasion. So when it comes to a moral suasion, as per regards to basically reducing what we call inflation, so moral suasion is central bank persuade commercial bank to behave in a manner to control money supply. Persuade, we have central bank, CB, persuade what we call commercial banks, banks to behave. We say to behave in what we call in a manner that we say that reduces what you basically call money supply. To behave in a manner, and that we say would basically reduce what we call the money supply. To behave in a manner that we say would basically reduce what we call the money supply. Together. So then fiscal policies to control inflation. We talk about this fiscal policy to do what? To control inflation very fast. To control what you basically call inflation. So the fiscal policy basically to control what you call inflation. To control what you basically call inflation. So one is what you call public expenditure. This is government spending. Public expenditure. So if government spend, what will happen to circulation of money? It's going to be high. So how do we use public expenditure? It should be reduced. So during inflation, it should be reduced to reduce circulation of money. Then you have public revenue, which is taxes. Public revenue, which is taxes. How should we go about taxes during inflation? So during inflation, we basically understand that public revenue should be increased. Public revenue should be increased, we say increased. Public revenue should be basically increased. Then you have borrowing. I want to talk about borrowing. So to take a key on borrowing. Are we attentive on borrowing? If you're very, very attentive on borrowing, if we are very attentive on borrowing, nataka to take a sikio. So a decision whether to borrow, look up. A decision whether to borrow, look up. A decision on whether to borrow, are we there? A decision on whether to borrow depends altogether. So for example, when it comes to internal borrowing, look up, are you getting me? Internal borrowing should be increased. When there's internal borrowing should be increased together. So when it comes to borrowing, during inflation, we need to understand that internal borrowing should be increased. Why? To reduce circulation of money. Jane Macharia with them, internal borrowing should basically be increased to reduce what we call circulation of money. If you look at the other aspect, whether that is in relation to external borrowing, we say whether to increase or decrease what we call external borrowing, it depends on what we call prevailing type of inflation. So on external borrowing, borrowing, we need to understand depends on the type of inflation. It depends on the type of inflation. So we need to understand that a question on whether to borrow externally depends on the type of inflation. So we need to understand that for internal borrowing, when we talk about internal borrowing, this should be, we say, increased. This should basically be increased. So internal borrowing, we are all agreeing that it should basically be increased. But on external borrowing, it depends on the type of inflation. What am I trying to say? So if an economy is facing, for example, if an economy is facing what we call a cost push inflation, if an economy is facing what we call, what causes a cost push inflation? Increase in the cost of production. So on what we call if a country is facing a cost push inflation, external borrowing should be increased. So should be increased. Should be, and saying increase, should basically be increased. If a country is facing what we call what you have as external, if a country is basically facing what we call what we have as external borrowing and or cost push inflation, external borrowing should be increased altogether. So on that side, if you have a demand pull, which is caused by demand pull inflation, if a country basically faces what's called a demand pull inflation, then what should be done? If a country is facing what's called a demand pull inflation, then what should be happening? If a country is facing a demand pull inflation, then what should be happening? External borrowing should be decreased. External borrowing, we say should be, and the word is decreased. Should basically be decreased. Give me yes if you're there. Give me a yes if you're there. So we respond with a yes. We respond with a yes. If we're there, we respond with a yes. So then that is understood. So we talk about very fast non-monetary policy. What we call the non-monetary policies. We talk about what's called the non-monetary policies. We call it the non-monetary policies. So we call it the non-monetary policies. We call it the non-monetary policies. So the non-monetary policy. So on the non-monetary policies, we have what's called wage adjustments. We have what's called the wage. We call it the wage adjustment together. So the non-monetary, we call it the wage adjustment, so together. So during inflation, wage increase should be controlled. So wage adjustment during inflation, wage increase should be controlled. So during inflation, it should be controlled. So wage increase, we are all agreeing that it should basically be controlled. During inflation, we need to understand that wage increase should basically be controlled. Respond with a yes. So the next is what we call price control. We give it as what we call the price controls. We call it the price control. So when it comes to the price control, we're basically saying that during inflation, government should set a price limit for basic. Set what we call price limit for what we call for basic. We call it for basic commodities. Set what we call a price limit for basic commodities. Set what we basically call a price limit for the basic commodity. For the basic commodity, set a price limit. Set what we call a price limit for the basic commodity. So then we have what we call output. We call it output adjustment. We call it the output adjustment. The next, we call it the output adjustment. So on the output adjustment, you're saying that during inflation, output should be increased. So we're saying that output, we're saying should be, and you're saying that should be increased. Output should basically be increased. But during inflation, we're saying output should basically be increased altogether. What are we trying to say? We're saying that, for example, the government can give subsidies to local producers altogether. So this is how to get it, government giving what we call subsidies. So we call it subsidies to what we call to encourage production, local producers. Together, subsidies to the local producers. Tafadhali nipatie yes. Then we talk about lastly, we call it restricting what we call import. We have it restricting what you basically call import. Restricting import. So when it comes to restricting import, what are we trying to say when it comes to restricting import? When it comes to restricting import, we say help to control against imported inflation. Helps control against what you basically call imported inflation. It does help to control against what you call imported inflation. Together, team. We respond with a yes. So those are non-monetary. Why is inflation a major policy issue? Why is inflation a major policy issue? Why is inflation, we call it a major policy issue in what we call in developing countries. Why is inflation, we call it a major policy issue in, why is inflation a major policy issue in developing country, Kenya being one. Why is it? Number one, it scares away in investors. One of the reasons why it's a major scarce what you call the person that we call investors. We say it reduces what we call profits. It does reduces what we call the profits. It does reduce what we call the profit. It does scares what we call investors by reducing the profit. It causes BOP deficit since export become expensive. Causes BOP deficit. And it says since export, the word is since export becomes expensive, since export becomes expensive. So BOP deficit is where we import more than we export. That is where we import more than we export. Together, team, we import more than we export. Tafadhali nipatie yes kama tuko pamoja. So again, why is it a policy issue? It causes unequal distribution. Again, it causes what we call unequal distribution of what we call of income and wealth. It does cause what we call unequal distribution. So we have it basically causing unequal distribution of income and wealth. It does cause what we call an equal distribution of income and wealth. Let's say consumers suffer during inflation. Consumers suffer since we say the cost of living, the cost of what we call of living, we say goes up. Since the cost of living, we basically say goes down. So the consumers will basically suffer. Why? Because the cost of living will definitely shoot up. Why? Because the cost of living, we say, would definitely shoot up. But we can also talk about it. The next, we can say that encourage malpractice such as smuggling. Encourages what's called malpractice, such as smuggling, such as what we call smuggling. It encourages malpractice such as smuggling. It does encourage malpractice such as smuggling. So we have social evils such as crime. We have social evils such as we have the crime, we have prostitution, etc. So causes social evils such as crime, prostitution, etc. Causes social evils such as crime. So it can also cause political revolution. Why is it a major policy issue? Political revolutions. It can cause political revolutions, etc. And the others you can get in the notes. Together, team. The others you can get in the notes. Give me a yes if we're together. If we are together, you give Mwalimu a yes. Respond with a yes if we are together. Perfect. So I want to talk about cost of living, then I go to unemployment. Cost of living. So what do you mean by cost of living? Somebody will say high cost of living and low cost of living, cost of living. Whenever we talk about cost of living, what does cost of living basically mean? When we talk about, so whenever we talk about cost of living, we talk about amounts required, money required to cover basic expenses. So we talk about money. The word is required to do what? To cover what we call basic expenses. So when you talk about the cost of living, our focus is basically money that is required to cover what we call basic expenses. What are these basic expenses? Basic expenses, e.g., we have food, health, accommodation, etc. So this is basically the money that is required to basically cover what's called the basic expenses. We have the food, we have health, we have accommodation, etc. Are we together? So in a certain place, over specific, in a certain place, over specific period of time. specific period, we say of time, over a specific period of time, over what you basically call specific period of time. Tafadhali tubonyeze yes kama tuko pamoja. Over what you call specific period of time. Give me a yes. So when you talk about high cost of living, is the basic amount required to cover basic needs is very high. So I hope when somebody talks about high cost of living, is where the amount required to cover basic commodities is basically high. That is what we call the high cost of living. On the other hand, when you talk about low cost of living, is the amount that is required to cover basic commodity is low. Together, causes of high cost of living, major causes. So we can talk about major causes of what we call of high cost of living, high cost of living, we call it living in what we call in developing countries. In developing countries. So major cost of high cost of living in developing countries, Kenya being one of it. What are the major causes? So the bank rates are very high. So we have one, we can talk about one as a high cost of living, high interest rate, high interest rate. So if the interest rates are high, commodities becomes very expensive together. If there's a high interest rate, even the basic commodity becomes expensive. So pandemics, pandemics, when you have pandemics such as COVID-19. Did you see what COVID did to us in terms of basic commodity? Did you see it? Did you see what it did to us in terms of basic commodity? Very expensive. Then existence of high external debt. High external debt. So when Kenya borrows, the effect of borrowing, I want you to see the effects of borrowing. When we borrow and then the external debt becomes very high, the implication of the external debt becoming high is because the government will basically make basic commodity very expensive because they want to pay back the debt. Then we can also talk about unfavorable weather. You have weather that cannot, unfavorable, we call it unfavorable, we call it weather. We call it unfavorable weather, a weather that cannot impact on agricultural commodity. So we can talk about unfavorable B, balance of payment. We can have what's called unfavorable balance, unfavorable B or P, unfavorable B or P. We can give two, and with the two, that should be okay. Calamities such as drought, we have calamities, and you call them such as drought. Calamities such as drought. Then we give one last one. Calamities such as drought. We give the last one. Political instability in a country. We can have political instability. So we can call it political instability. Give me a yes if we are at home. When it comes to that, if we are at home, yes. So I want to briefly also talk about unemployment. So we come to unemployment. We come to what's called unemployment. So what's called unemployment? So we call it unemployment. We call it the unemployment. So what is unemployment? That is the first thing that gets into my mind. What is unemployment? So number one, whenever we talk about unemployment, people are willing to work. Are we together? At the prevailing rate, they have what you call, people are willing to work at the prevailing wage rate. They have the ability to work, but are unable to secure jobs. So people are willing to work. When you talk about unemployment, people, we just abbreviated people, willing to work, That means have qualification, willing to work, have qualification, but there's no job, but they are there is no job. Is there guaranteed that there's a job for you? Is it guaranteed that you're going to have a job? Sit somewhere as a manager? Is it guaranteed? Levin, is it guaranteed that there's a job waiting for you? Magdalene, is it a guarantee? So you're willing to work at prevailing rate, but there's no job for you. So it's not a guarantee. But again, knowledge is power. You see what I tell you? Knowledge is power. We don't read for exam. If you read for exam, which is equally good, it's good to pass exam. But we don't just read for exam. We read for, even for us to create jobs for ourselves. Who agrees with me? That's why when you come to class, you must be taught to tell. Jane, is it true that you should be taught to detail so that you counter? So that as you step out of economics and you're told, can you teach economics? If you did understand economics and you're taught to details, you can easily grab it and teach it because you're not basically taught to get a job, but you're taught to have skills and ability to be able to replicate what Mwalimu was doing. That's why we teach. So when you talk about unemployment rate, for example, if I was to told to get unemployment, what we call unemployment rate, we will have it as what we call total unemployment over total workforce, total unemployment over what you call the workforce, over the workforce times total workforce times 100%. So we have it as total unemployment over what we call total workforce times 100% together. So under unemployment and full employment. Under employment. So when you talk about unemployment, underemployment, then there's two concepts. We have what's called full employment. I wanted just to explain these two concepts. Underemployment and full employment. Are we attentive to get to hear the difference between the two? Are we attentive to get to hear the difference between the two? Are we very attentive to get to hear the difference between the two? Perfect, thank you so much. Just a minute. Perfect, so under unemployment, when we talk about under unemployment, situation where labor force work for less than full time, work under employment, work than less than full time. Together, is that at all? Work than less than full time, full time. So situation where labor force work less than full time, together. Less productive in respect to training of economic needs, together. So it's saying that workers are less productive with respect to training and economic need. So they work less than full time. That is under employment. Together, team. So the second is what we call full employment. So when it comes to full employment, situation where economy, all available resources are being used in efficient way possible. All available resources are basically used in the most efficient way possible altogether. So full employment altogether basically embody what's called highest amount of skilled and unskilled that can be employed in economy. So we say resources are put in the most efficient way. So if it's labor, when we talk about full employment, it is basically used in the most efficient way. That is full employment. That is the difference between underemployment, which is labor force work less than full times, or workers are less productive with respect to training and economic need. So the difference between those two, is it at home? Is that at home? If that is at home, you give Mwalimu a yes. If that is at home, you give Mwalimu a yes. Perfect. So I made a common question. We have type and causes of unemployment. We call it this a common examiner types and causes of what they call of unemployment. Causes of unemployment, types and causes of unemployment. So what we call the types and causes of unemployment. Type and causes of unemployment. Types and causes of unemployment. So one is what's called structural unemployment. We give it a structural unemployment. So we give it a what's called the structural unemployment. Structural unemployment. So we call it the structural unemployment. So when you talk about structural unemployment, it occurs due to structural changes. You know, what are these structural changes? Changes in demand in a particular industry caused by what we call structural changes. We call it structural changes, i.e. changes. We call it changes in what's called in demand. We call it in an economy. Changes in demand in an economy. For example, change in what? We can talk about in an economy or industry, i.e. changes in what's called in tastes. We have what's called the preferences, changes in taste preferences. We have the taste preferences, fashion, etc. So we have it as fashion, etc. Fashion, etc. So give it a yes, fashion, etc. Give me a yes if we're together. Give me a yes if we're together. So that is what's called structural. Then we have what's called casual stroke erratic. Casual stroke what they call erratic unemployment. A very common area, this erratic unemployment. So when you talk about casual unemployment stroke erratic, casual stroke what they call erratic, as a result of temporary occupation caused by what they call temporary occupation. It's caused by unemployment caused by temporary occupations, e.g., road construction. We have what's called road construction. So we have it as the road construction. We have the temporary occupation. For example, those who are building road, maybe it's there for a small period altogether. Or construction of building, or construction, or what's called construction of what they call of a building. Or the construction of a building. Temporary occupation, construction, road construction, or construction of a building, or construction of a building. Give me a yes if we are together. If we are together, we give it a yes. Perfect. Perfect. So then we go to the next, seasonal unemployment. We call it seasonal unemployment. So when it comes to seasonal unemployment, are we there? When it comes to seasonal unemployment, it is occurs due to changes in season. Occurs, we say due to changes in seasons. Occurs due to changes in season. So it definitely occurs due to changes in season. It occurs due to changes in season. I would say it occurs due to changes in season. For example, common in tourism and agricultural sector. Common in tourism and what we call in agricultural sectors. So common in tourism and agricultural sectors. So when it comes to what we call common in tourism and agricultural sectors, we are basically saying common basically in we say common in tourism, and we call them agricultural sectors. Common in tourism and what we call agricultural sectors. For example, agriculture. There's a peak season altogether. So people get employed during peak season, like December, when it comes to tourism. So when those peak seasons are gone, there are no jobs there altogether. Again, also agriculture, the workforce in agriculture is very common There's a peak season for agriculture where they have jobs. When that peak season goes, they no longer have the jobs. Are we together? We respond with a yes, if that is understood. Then we have what we call frictional call it frictional to call transitional, we call it unemployment. Frictional to what we call transitional unemployment. What we call frictional to what we call transitional unemployment. So we call it the frictional to what we call transitional unemployment. We call it frictional, so what we basically call transitional unemployment. So this is an employment that is caused, that occurs between the time of leaving a job, we call it between what we call the time of what we call of leaving one job, and you say to the time of what we call of getting, we call it another job. So is the time of basically leaving one job and the time of getting another job. It's basically what's called transitional or what's called frictional unemployment. That time of leaving, of transitioning, of leaving one job and getting to another job, we call it transitional unemployment. Then we have what we call voluntary. We call it voluntary unemployment. We call it the voluntary unemployment. We call it the voluntary unemployment. We call it voluntary. We call it voluntary unemployment. So when you talk about voluntary, so what we call real wage unemployment is also called real wage. We call it the real wage unemployment. So what we call the real wage unemployment. What we call voluntary, so what we call real wage unemployment. So what we basically call real wage unemployment. So what we basically called real wage unemployment. What is it? So occurs when people voluntarily stop working. When people voluntarily, we call it voluntarily, we say stops working. When people basically voluntarily stops working. So when you say voluntarily, you stop working at your free, are we together? When industries are not willing to employ people seeking employment. Voluntarily industries stops employing. We say employing people. We call it people willing to do what? To work. Willing to work. When industry stops employing people that are willing to work. However, willing to employ people seeking employment. Industry are not willing to employ people seeking to employment. However, job seekers are willing to take lower wage altogether. So in this case, we understand that vacancies, but the vacancy, but firms are not willing to pay low wages. So people accept. People just voluntarily stop working. So then we have the next. We call it involuntary. We call it involuntary, and we call it unemployment. Involuntary unemployment. So there's what we call involuntary unemployment. So when it comes to involuntary unemployment, we basically call it occurs when people people involuntary, people, we say people involuntary stops working. Involuntary stops working. They're not willing, but they stop working. We can say due to sickness or retrenchment. Due to what we call sickness, due to sickness or what we call retrenchment. Can call it retrenchment. Due to sickness or what we call retrenchment. Due to basically what we call sickness or retrenchment or retirement altogether, or retirement, or retirements, or what we call retirement. Together, team, or retirement. Give me yes if you're together, or retirement. Kindly give me yes if you're there. We can discuss about 10. We can discuss about 10. Then you have what's called disguised unemployment. What do you call disguised unemployment. So we have what we basically call disguised unemployment. So when it comes to disguised unemployment, we're basically saying that disguised unemployment or hidden unemployment. Disguised is the same as hidden stroke under employment altogether. Occurs when workers are not fully utilized. So occurs when workers, we say are not fully, and we call it utilized. Workers are basically not fully utilized. So it occurs when workers, we say, are not fully utilized. So when you say workers are not fully utilized, when you basically say workers are not fully utilized, we're saying that they are doing lesser than they're capable of doing. Are we together? Occurs when workers are not fully utilized, they're doing lesser than they are. Occurs when the workers are not fully utilized. They're doing less than they're capable of doing. Then we can also talk about unproductive unemployment. We call it unproductive, productive, and we call it unemployment. Unproductive unemployment. So when you talk about unproductive unemployment, occurs workers do not have necessary tools to work. Workers do not have what we call necessary tools of work. Magdalene Tukosawa, necessary tools of work. So workers do not have necessary tools of work. We say that the workers do not have necessary tools of work. So workers do not have what we call necessary tools of work. Workers do not have what we call necessary tools of work. So then we have what we call on the next, we call it demand deficiency unemployment. Demand deficiency, we call it deficiency unemployment. Demand deficiency unemployment. So demand deficiency and unemployment. We call it demand deficiency unemployment. So whenever we talk about demand deficiency unemployment, we talk about situation where aggregate demand is lower than aggregate demand. We say aggregate demand, we say is more than, we call it more than the aggregate, we call it more than the aggregate supply. So aggregate demand is basically more than the aggregate supply. Aggregate demand, we say, is more than the aggregate supply. Supply in an economy. I want to expound on this. Tafadhali nipatie I expound on that. So we're saying that aggregate demand is basically more than the aggregate supply. Allow me to expound on that. So what am I trying to say? This is what I'm trying to say. When I say aggregate demand is basically more than aggregate supply, we're trying to say that producers are unable to sell their output, and to cut down, producers are unable to sell their output, and to cut down on cost, they end up retrenching some workers. So when you say aggregate demand is more than aggregate supply, Producers are unable to sell their product. Producers are able to do what? Sell their products. We say cut down on what we call on expenditures. Cut down on expenditure. We are talking about cutting down on expenditure. Cut down on expenditure. We have cutting down on expenditure. They end up retrenching workers. They end up retrenching workers. So you're not able to sell. So what happens if you're not able to sell? Because from the sales is where you get money to pay. So you end up retrenching what we call workers. So then we have open unemployment. 10, we have it open unemployment. I want us to discuss this open unemployment. Can you hear me, Levine? Can you hear me, Jane Masharia? Can you hear me, Magdalene? You give me yes if you can, if you're together with me. If you're together with me, then you just give me yes. So if you look at those, are we together? If we look at those, open unemployment, we say that condition where people have no work to do. People have no work to do. Open unemployment. People have no work. So we call it no work to do what? To do. So it's a situation where people basically have what's called no work to do. No work to do. They are able to work, but they're willing, but no work to do. So they're able and willing to work, but there's no work. Then you have what's called chronic unemployment, or just chronic unemployment. So when you look at the word chronic unemployment, when you talk about chronic unemployment, so this is particularly very common to developing countries. Are you listening? So whenever we talk about chronic, this is particularly very common to developing countries have what's called a chronic together. So because they experience what we call developing countries, they experience what we call vicious circle. What we call vicious circle of what we call poverty. Poverty. When you say chronic, this is serious unemployment. So this serious unemployment is basically common. Common to what? Common to what we call developing countries. Not developed, but developing countries. Are we together? Common to developing countries. They're the ones who experience what we call chronic unemployment, because they experience what we call vicious circle of poverty. So if you look at these countries, there's what we call underutilization. We call it underutilization of what we call of the resources. We have what we call underutilization of the resources. We have what you basically call underutilization of the resources. We have what you basically call underutilization of resources. We have what you call underutilization of resources. What you call underutilization of resources. They don't utilize their resources, that is underutilization. We have issues to do with when we talk about chronic high population growth, etc. High population growth. Then I can talk about 12. Urban unemployment. I can talk about urban unemployment. So what is urban unemployment? When we talk about urban unemployment. So urban employment, due to rural urban migration, this is caused by rural urban migration, caused by rural urban, and we call it migration. It's caused by rural urban migration. So this is definitely caused by rural urban migration. It is caused by what you call rural urban migration. It's definitely caused by rural urban migration. So this is caused by rural urban migration. So that is, then you can also have what we call technological. Are we together? unemployment. It's a type of structural employment, which can, when you say technological unemployment, are we attentive? Please, I want you to hear what I'm saying. I want you to enjoy and hear what I'm saying. So when you talk about technological, give me a yes if you're there. If you're there. So when you talk about technological unemployment, it's basically caused by, we say that technological is caused by as a result of technological improvement. So technological unemployment is caused by technological improvement. So introduction of new machinery, people don't know how to use those machines. Then you have what we call cyclical. It's caused by trade cycles. For example, when there is recession and depression, we will not have work. So urban employment is caused by rural-urban migration, people migrating. If you have a lot of people migrating to urban areas, the end product is that there will be shortage of jobs. So shortage of jobs. So it brings me to something else. I'm about to revise. It brings me to something. When it gets to 30, we revise a few questions. Causes, when it gets to 30, we revise something small. Causes of rural-urban migration. Causes of what we call rural urban migration. So why do people migrate? Migration. We have talked about urban unemployment. Then talk about causes of rural urban migration. This is a general question. So availability of high income opportunities in urban areas. High income opportunity, high income, we call it opportunities in urban areas. High income opportunities in urban areas. So the presence of high income opportunities basically in urban areas that causes it. Seasonal unemployment in rural areas. Seasonal unemployment, seasonal, we say seasonal unemployment in rural areas. Unemployment, because they depend on agriculture, unemployment in rural areas. So they are largely dependent on agriculture. So then we can talk about existence of more job opportunity in urban areas, more job opportunity, more job opportunities in urban areas. More job opportunities in urban areas. So there's a crave for people to go to urban areas because of more job opportunities in urban areas. Then we can talk about what's called high insecurities in rural areas. High insecurities. We can talk about high insecurities in what you call in rural areas. Insecurity is high. People migrate. Then you can talk about fluctuation in prices of agricultural products. Fluctuation in prices of what you basically call agricultural product. So fluctuations in the prices of agricultural products. Fluctuation, natural calamities such as drought, we call it natural calamities. Calamities such as drought. Natural calamities such as drought. So we have it as natural calamities such as drought. Natural calamities such as drought. Natural calamities such as drought. So we have what's called natural calamities such as drought. So we have what's called natural calamities such as drought. Then better social amenities in urban areas. Better social amenities in what's called in urban areas. Tuko pamoja. That's why people shift from rural to urban areas. Together. Give me a yes if you're together. By that, we say we start our revision. So implications of rural urban migration. Implication of what they call of rural urban migration. So what is the implication of rural urban migration? So I think we can revise this and we get two questions. We talk about implication of rural urban migration. So we have one of which is urban unemployment. Urban unemployment. We call it the urban unemployment as the first implication. So shortage of social amenities. We have shortage of what they call of social amenities. Social amenities, shortage of what they call social amenities. High demand of goods and services in urban areas. High demand for what they call for goods and services in urban areas. So a high demand for goods and services in urban areas. So development of slums. Why do you have slum? So we have the next development of slums. So we have what's called development of slums in urban areas. Social evils, we have social evils, and we call it such as crime and what we call prostitution, such as crime and prostitution. Social evils such as crime and prostitution. Then we have what we call congestion in urban areas. We have what we basically call congestions in what we call in urban areas. So we have what we basically call congestions in urban areas. Congestion in urban areas, dependency in urban areas, dependencies in urban areas, where you have situations of what we basically call dependencies, high dependency in the urban areas, what you call dependency, and you're talking about dependency in the urban areas. We call it dependency in urban areas. Dependency in urban areas. I want us to turn to our purpose. So good people, I want us to turn to our purpose. We try, even what is pending, we are together. Dependence in urban areas. If you're there, we'll give it to you. We turn to our purpose. Do you have a purpose? Do we have our purpose? If you have our purpose, then give it to us. Just a minute. Have we turned to our purpose? Have we turned to our purpose? Are we on our purpose? Perfect. So look at August 2025. That is question 3D. August 25, question 3D. August 25, question 3D. August 25, question 3D. August 25, question 3D. So August 25, question 3D. August 25, question 3D. So open that question, August 2025, question 3D. If you're neat, you give me yes. So August 25, question 3D. You give me a yes. So are we on it? Tafadhali bonyeza yes kama tuko pamoja. 3D. If we on it, you give mwalimu a yes. So it talks about explain 4 structural causes of structural changes. Causes of structural changes. Explain causes of what we call of structural. We call it causes of what we call structural unemployment. Have we talked about it? So causes of structural unemployment. Did we talk about them? For example, changes in demands in a particular country, changes in demand. So we have changes in demand, changes in demand. Did we talk about them? Magdalene, did you talk about it? Changes in demand in a particular country? Did you talk about it? Changes in demand with the one. Then we had changes in fashion. Changes in fashion. We can talk about changes in fashion. Changes in tastes. And then we can talk about changes in preference, changes in what they call in preferences. So these are causes of structural unemployment. So say changes in structures in an economy together. Changes in demand in a particular industry. We have changes in fashion, changes in taste, and changes in preference. Tafadhali nipatie yes kama moja. If we are together, you give me a yes. So on that particular year, I want us to go to question 7. I want us to go to question I want us to go to question 7. Question 7C. Question 7C. Look at that question 7C. Question 7C. Are you on question 7C? Give me a yes if you're there. Identify 4 types of unemployment. So we have frictional unemployment, when you're transitioning from one job to another, seasonal unemployment, seasonal unemployment. When you talk about seasonal unemployment, we're talking about those who are working in tourism. Tuko pamoja on that. So we have unproductive unemployment. You don't have unproductive, productive unemployment. You do not have necessary tools for work. Unproductive unemployment, you do not have necessary tools for work. So we talked about what we call structural unemployment, etc. Structural changes in that structural unemployment. So kama tuko sawa tubonyeze yes on that particular question. Perfect. So we pick another one. So then I want us to look at, there's a particular question here that is December 2024. Look at December 2024, question 6B. Question 6B. 6B. December 24, question 6B. December 24, question 6B. Are we on it? December 24, question 6B. DEC 2024, 2024, question 6B. So are we there? For economic implication of rural-urban migration. Economic implications of what I call rural-urban migration. Are we on it? Have we discussed such a thing? Economic implication. So one of the implications we have is urban unemployment. Urban unemployment. Is that an implication? When you go, most of you congest urban areas, what follows is unemployment together. So again, shortage of social amenities in urban areas. Development of slums, perfect. Development of the slums. Development of the slums. So we say shortage of social amenities in urban areas. Shortage of what we call social amenities. Amenities in what we call in urban areas. So we have shortage of social amenities in the urban areas. Then we have increase in pollution in urban areas. Pollution in urban areas. Pollution in what we call in urban areas. Pollution in urban areas. We have what we call pollution in urban areas. Social evils such as crime and prostitution. Social evils such as we have the crimes and what we call prostitution. Social evils such as crime and prostitution. We have crime, prostitution, etc. Congestion in urban areas, low productivities in rural areas. We have low productivity because people know there are low productivity in rural areas. So give me a yes if you're together. Give me a yes if we're together. Thank you, Levin. Thank you, Levin. Thank you, Levin. So I want to pick more questions. More questions. More questions. More questions. So look at we have it as April 2024, question 7C. April 2024. Question 7C. Tafadhali kama uko hapo bonyeza yes. Question 7C. Are we there? Question 7C. So it talks about explain four monetary policies that central bank you apply to control inflation. Monetary policy, bank rate. So number one, we have bank rate or interest rate. So we say increase. How do you apply it? Increase interest rate. Interest rate to do what? To reduce what I call money supply. To do what? To basically reduce what we call that the first monetary policy, we call it the bank rate or the interest rate. So what do? We increase the interest rate to reduce what we call the money supply, to reduce what we call the money supply. Give me yes if you're together. To reduce what you basically call the money supply. Tafadhali bonyeza yes kama tuko pamoja. We respond with yes. And we discuss that. So we talk about open market operation. That is OMO. OMO. So how do we reduce sell security? Government sell what we call security to do what? To reduce money supply. To reduce what we basically call money supply. Government selling security to reduce money supply. Money supply. We also talked about what we call cash ratio. Cash ratio. Cash ratio increasing to reduce what you basically call money supply. So say increasing the ratio, the cash ratio, and say to reduce what you call the money supply, to reduce the money supply, to reduce what you basically call the money supply. So the next we talk about selective credit control. Selective credit control. So central bank issuing a directive that credit should basically go to XYZ areas and do not go to areas that are not approved. So increasing compulsory, the next we'll talk about increasing what we call compulsory deposit. Increasing what you basically call compulsory deposit. So, the deposits, we say that the deposits, we talk about deposits, and you're saying that compulsory deposit, the amount that other commercial banks get to the central bank, you increase that. So the supply of money reduce what we call compulsory deposit. The amount that is normally channeled to central bank, you increase that compulsory deposit together. Is that satisfactory sorted? Is that satisfactory sorted? Is that satisfactory sorted? Give me yes. I want to revise one more question. Only one more. Only one more. Only one more. So again, when you look at August 23, there's a question that is being repeated. What types of unemployment? Have we talked about unemployment? That is August 23. If you look at August 23, question 1B. Question 1B. Are you seeing that question being repeated? Question 1B. Question 1B. Four types of unemployment. So that question is repeated. That question, we shouldn't repeat that. Confirm if that question is repeated. Is that repeated? That is repeated. So tomorrow, can we meet much earlier tomorrow? By 12. Can we meet by 12 to 2 instead of, is it possible for us to meet from 12 so that I can, tomorrow I can leave church earlier? Is it possible, Levin and Jane? Jane, is it possible? Yes, so Jane, communicate that we'll meet from, you communicate that in the evening, that we'll meet from 12 to 2. Yes, communicate that, Jane. So that will be on top. Communicate that. Yes, perfect. So we can close it there. Are we getting ready for exam? Are we getting ready for exam? If you're getting ready for exam, you give it a yes. Magdalene, are you getting ready? Are you prepared? Perfect. I'm happy. What about you, Queen? Are you getting prepared? Thank you so much. So we can stop it at that point for today and say God bless you and God bless you.